Hello again, everyone. I'm William Hazel, Executive Director of Virginia Beach Surf and Rescue Museum. I'm here again with Jessica Dressen behind the camera, and we would just like to do another episode of this cool museum, trying to do our virtual tours, and you can find them online as we try to post more virtual tours during this really difficult time. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes sharing with you one of the exhibits in the main rescue gallery called Rescue Electric. And this is a synopsis of the tragedy of the Marine Electric shipwreck. Marine Electric sank. This big coal cargo ship sank off the coast of Chincoteague on February 12th of 1983. And this singular event changed two big things in the maritime industry. The tragedy, unfortunately, happened because of the way the ship had been constructed, or perhaps I should say deconstructed. Marine Electric is a cargo ship built in the early part of the 1960s, has a retrofit that was very common for the day. What happened is they used to cut the cargo ships in half and do what was called jumbo-sizing. They would actually add steel to the middle. They would make the ships longer. And in 1967, that's what happens to Marine Electric. It actually gets cut. 100 foot of the ship is added. It goes from being about a 500-foot vessel to about a 600-foot vessel. All to increase capacity, all to increase the money. Because the construction was not inspected and they didn't have rigorous standards for inspection back then, it was kind of up to each plant as to the quality of their vessels. Now, in this raging storm in 1983, Marine Electric breaks up and goes down in the water. It went down very fast, actually. The crew goes into the water. Now, this is before rescue suits. This is before the Mustang suit you saw kind of our Henry wearing at the beginning of the shot. This is before survival suits. These men are in the water. They're in the Atlantic Ocean in the early part of February. They're immediately starting to freeze to death. Now, they did get word out, and the Coast Guard did go to the scene with helicopters. Now, back in the day, the Coast Guard would have lowered baskets to the vessel, to the men in the water. Baskets just like this one. And the drill was that basket, I would be in the water, I would see the basket, and when it came down to the ocean, it was my job, the victim, to climb inside it. And what the Coast Guard crews begin to witness in this shipwreck scene are these frozen crew members in the water. They're alive, they're alert, and they're literally looking at the basket right in front of them in the water, but they can't get in. They can't get in because of their hypothermia. They can't move their arms, they can't move their legs, they can't move any part of their body at all. And very sadly that day, the Coast Guard helicopter crews watched these men die. 31 crew members died that day in the water. Only 3 were able to survive. The tragedy changes, number 1, maritime inspections. The idea of just a shipyard doing its own inspections ended. And shipyards had to follow, from this point on, very rigorous standards. The second thing that is produced is the now well-implemented Coast Guard's Rescue Swimmer program. Now, this started right after the wreck in 1984. It was called the Coast Guard Authorization Act of '84. And it gave birth, it funded the Rescue Swimmer program that we kind of take for granted today. Here's a photograph from 1985, and that's the first 5 swimmers that graduated from the first class that year. Now, when the Coast Guard started the swimmer program, they would train with the United States Navy. The Navy already had rescue swimmers, a training program. Those were the guys that would go in the water to try to rescue pilots that were downed near the ship. They start their own school and build their own facility, and it's not too far away from where we're standing now in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. That was actually opened in 1997. The Coast Guard began training its own swimmers. Today, that rescue rate, that rating for a Coast Guard's person is AST, Aviation Survival Technician. And rescue swimmers are both male and female. It is one of the most rigorous trainings in the United States military. The Coast Guard still sees around a 50% dropout rate of the AST school in Elizabeth City. The pool has, the training facility has massive pools, very sophisticated training machines. They can actually simulate weather and waves in these pools. They have disorienting noises. It's amazingly difficult training in order to give someone the skills that we see on TV all the time. You see these guys lowering out of helicopters. They're in the suits, they're in the helmets, they're lowering out of these helicopters. That began in the 1980s. And it all started because of the tragedy of Marine Electric. And thankfully, we have these amazing people, and they are rescuing people constantly now. The survival rate of people in the water has increased significantly because of this huge change in history that happened. And it happened because of that shipwreck that wasn't too far from our coast.